All right, Mr. Davis did a great job talking about the neuron last video. I'm totally going to have to step up my prop game if I'm going to compete with those 2 extension cords he had going on, but I'm up to the task. Maybe not this time, but soon. So he talked about the neural impulse, and he ended with the synapse, and that is the gap between one neuron and the next neuron where the neurotransmitters pass. And I always wondered, why is there a gap? Why aren't they actually connected? Why aren't they touching? Well, neurons are always moving. In fact, as you learn, your brain changes shape. It literally changes shape. Neurons are moving together. They are moving to different spots, and we'll talk about what helps us move to those different spots in a bit. But that's pretty fascinating stuff, that your brain actually changes shape. When I teach you something, I'm changing the shape of your brain. Okay, so we're going to look at the neural impulse. When a neuron is sitting there minding its own business, it is what I've heard from a biology teacher. It's a salty banana. There's sodium on the outside, sodium ions on the outside, potassium ions on the inside. So it's sitting there minding its own business. It doesn't have a charge. Now, when a neurotransmitter says release the hounds, we got to have a charge. We have what's called an action potential. And action potential, it seems like a contradiction in terms. It's action and it's potential, but it's moving. So it's sending the charge down the way. And what happens is those ions pass between the permeable barrier. They're passing within the nodes of our NVA. They're starting at the hillock, which is where the cell meets the axon. So those ions are passing in. When it creates the proper charge, it sends the charge down the neuron, and it says, so really what is happening in a neuron is we have a cell that is converting electricity into chemicals, which is the neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter passes, the chemical becomes electricity, sending it down the neuron, and then so on and so on. Kind of crazy stuff. And then it operates on the all or nothing principle. You're not going to get a weak charge in your neuron. It either fires or it doesn't. So you're not going to say, well, the reason I'm not learning is because my neurons are weak and they're not firing very well. No, they either do or they don't. That's the all or nothing principle. We talked about how your brain changes shape. That is due in large part to your glial cells. Those are the support cells in your brain. It's kind of the glue. That's what I think of when I think glial, the glue that holds all of your neurons together. Your neurons have to sit somewhere. They sit in the glial cells. They help form new synapses, not new neurons, new synapses. So you got these 2 neurons sitting over here. They've never met before. And your glial cell says, Mr. Woodard just taught you something. It's time that you meet. How do those neurons travel? They travel by the glial cells. Also, the myelin sheath that Mr. Davis talked about, the insulation around that neuron that allows the charge to travel all the way down. So glial cells make up that myelin sheath that we already talked about. And then we have mirror neurons. There's a great video. We might be able to get to it, but there are certain types of neurons that are really interesting that we have and a lot of other creatures don't have. I'm going to hold off on talking about those until later because the video is wonderful. Okay, now we get to talk about neurotransmitters. This is my favorite, really this one of my favorite parts of this unit and one of my favorite parts of the year. These are chemicals and they transmit things through your neuron. Neuron transmitter, neurotransmitter. So at the end of one neuron, the neuron releases a neurotransmitter into that synapse, and the next neuron picks it up. So really, it's as simple as that. That's what's going on. There are all kinds of neurotransmitters, many of them you have heard of before. So I'm going to go through these very quickly. Maybe Mr. Davis will go through them one more time with some of his examples that he will help you with. So dopamine. Here's really what I want you to think about. It's reward. So if you have a gambling addiction, you really have an addiction to dopamine. Because every time somebody says, you look nice, every time you level up, every time you get 100 coins, you get a reward and you get a little burst of dopamine in your brain. So it is, and you might want to write this down in your notes, it is the neurotransmitter of addiction. Also, if you don't have enough dopamine, it can cause Parkinson's disease. It can cause other types of disease. So it's weird. It's not just your brain, it's also in your body. Dopamine helps you move as well. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. So dopamine is that reward. We get a lot of it. Why are these so addictive? They're addictive because they release dopamine. And really, that's what a lot of people get from dope is they get that reward. Okay. Serotonin. I'm going to personify serotonin. Sarah, my friend Sarah, every time I see her, she makes me so happy. Sarah is so nice. She's wonderful. She's beautiful. She makes me happy. So serotonin changes your mood. If you have a rush of serotonin, you feel great. You're happy. A lot of drugs like, and it's such a big one. Think of ecstasy. I mean, and I've never taken ecstasy, and I hope you haven't either because it's kind of dangerous. But the idea is what happens when you take ecstasy. The idea is you feel ecstatic, you feel happy, so it raises your mood. If you don't have enough serotonin, if you don't see serotonin enough, she hasn't been coming around lately, you might feel this depression or anxiety. So that's where we get serotonin, which makes our mood better. Now, norepinephrine. Some of you might have allergies and you need an EpiPen. That's this epi right here. Epinephrine is adrenaline. I'll say that again. Epinephrine is adrenaline. So if you need an EpiPen, you are getting an adrenaline shot. It opens up. It's basically rocket fuel for your system. It makes sure that everything works in a way that, and it's not good for you to always have that adrenaline running through your body. Chronic stress is bad, but a little bit of adrenaline, especially when your throat's closing up and things like that, can really help. So if epinephrine is an EpiPen that goes into your leg, norepinephrine is the adrenaline for your brain. So it's arousal, alertness, things like that. If you don't have enough norepinephrine, there might be antidepressants, tricyclics, that can help you. You're not going to have to remember this, but some of you might be on tricyclic antidepressants or beta blockers. So I just wanted you to know. What you really need to know is that norepinephrine is like adrenaline for your brain. If you have too much norepinephrine, you're going to have high blood pressure. If you don't have enough, you may have depression. But mostly serotonin is the big one. And maybe Mr. Davis will talk about selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors in the next one. In fact, I probably should talk about that a little bit. I'm just going to go back and make sure that we talk about that. Many of you know somebody who's on antidepressants like Prozac. What Prozac does is it makes sure that the serotonin that goes out into the synapse is not reuptaken into the previous neuron. So all SSRIs do, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, all they do is they keep the serotonin out in the synapse longer so we can keep more serotonin flowing, and you can be in a better mood. So that's an SSRI like Prozac. Acetylcholine, it's really good for muscle contractions. Your muscles can't contract if you don't have enough acetylcholine. Trying to move this out of the way, not working too well, but that's fine. The way I remember it is an ACE bandage goes around your muscles. You know that those beige bandages that go around your muscles when you're sore. So an ACE bandage goes around your muscle. Maybe Mr. Davis has a better mnemonic than I do, but that's how I remember. It's a transmitter of the central nervous system that helps with muscle contractions. Also, we can't learn unless we have acetylcholine. So acetylcholine in your brain, whenever you learn something and it sticks, it's because of acetylcholine. Alzheimer's disease, of course, because of muscle contractions. We have a problem with that, and also because of memory and any muscular disorders. I want to talk about Botox. Botulism toxin is Botox. Well, let's talk about an agonist and an antagonist, and then I'll pick up where I'll let Mr. Davis pick up where I left off. Nicotine is an agonist for acetylcholine. Agonist means it mimics it, it increases it. So if you smoke cigarettes, then I hate to say it, but it's actually kind of good for your fast twitch muscle fibers. Why do you think baseball players chew tobacco? I'm not saying you should use tobacco, but it allows them to move very quickly. So nicotine helps with acetylcholine, helps your muscles move better and more quickly. Botulism toxin is Botox. Botox is what gets injected into people's muscles of their face. It gets rid of wrinkles. How does Botox get rid of wrinkles? What it does is it paralyzes that muscle. No joke, it paralyzes that muscle. So this is my impression of somebody on Botox smiling. It's because their muscles are paralyzed and they can't get the wrinkles around their eyes and these other places. If you eat botulism toxin, it kills you. So it's really weird. It's a poison that we can inject in small doses into your face. But if we put it in your gut, it's going to kill you. These next three are so fun. I'm jealous that Mr. Davis gets to go through GABA, glutamate, and endorphins, but I'm going to let him pick up where I left off.